Well, that is my sign. I'm going to get going here. We welcome all of you. My assistant, Kristen, is unable to be with us today, so I'm going to fly solo, introduce myself. Pleasure to have you all here. Please introduce yourself in the chat room. Let us know where you're from. Let us know if you're returning after, if you're a regular here or if this is your first time here. We welcome you. And it's just I really sincerely appreciate you all making the time to come to this webinar, monthly webinar that I have. So here's how it works. I will present for approximately an hour. And then if many people have to jump off after an hour, that's fine. Stay on as long as you can. And then on the hour, I'll wrap this up and then we stay for an extra half an hour. For those of you who'd like to connect with each other, we build quite a strong community here as part of people who are committed to coming to this regularly. And questions and answers, if you have some comments, some reflections, and just an opportunity to get to know each other and reflect on the material. So feel free if you can, if you have an extra half an hour of time to stay on, please feel free. I do shut the recording off on the hour so that just to keep confidentiality and keep the privacy for you. And the other thing is you're welcome to leave your video off, but when we join you for the question and answer period afterwards, it's lovely if you can turn your video back on. And so I really like to be able to see eyeballs. Anyway, I shall proceed. We're going to talk today about embracing change. Let me give you a very brief agenda. We're going to give you a roadmap, a framework for leading change. It's not the roadmap, it's a roadmap for leading yourself and others through change. You may relate this material to any team that you're on. You can relate it to yourself. You can relate it to your family, a community that you're involved in. Wherever your context is, I hope that you'll find relevance because it's going to be very personal. As those of you who know me know that I keep it personal. I want to leave you some practical strategies for managing that roadmap and getting people and yourself through change, no matter where that change is. And then if there's time, we're going to talk about the heroes or the heroine's journey. I want to give my take on that, just to leave you a bit of an inspirational message at the end, that life is not a chapter, life is a novel. And so whatever you're going through right now is a chapter in your life. It's not the whole story, not until we're done. But if we do go over a little bit today on the hero's journey, a few minutes, so at least you'll get and you have to leave on the hour. I will be done with the practical strategies and the roadmap before you have to jump off, if you jump off on the hour. All right. I'm going to start with my own purpose. Through my presence and my message, I help people connect with their true nature and express it consciously in their work and their life. Now, I'm going to make this relevant to change in a moment here. This is what my life and this is not a job for me. This is my life's work. This is my purpose. My premise is that we are naturally creative, compassionate, calm, committed, and capable. And if we are not anywhere in your life that you don't experience these qualities, doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. It means that you're disconnected with your true nature. The authentic way is that we don't need to change yourself. The older I get, and the longer I'm in this business, I've been around this business in the leadership development, started off as a family therapist, and then evolved into taking what I learned about families and adapting it into organizations and my leadership development. And the older I get and the longer I'm in this business, the more I'm less the more sure I am about less things and the less sure I am about more things. But one of the things that I'm becoming more sure about is that I no longer make an effort to try to change people. I'm here to invite you. I'm inviting you on a very personal journey. If it's okay not to come with me, it's hard enough to change myself, much less change anybody else. So folks, we don't need to change ourselves. What we need to do is to embark in this journey is to come home to yourself. And this will change everything. I like to use this Pablo Picasso quote that I wake up depressed every day and I start painting and the depression lifts. When he comes home to himself, the depression lifts. What is it that you have to do every day to come home to yourself? What is it that you have to do? I have to do this. This is my life's work. Now, it's not my only life's work, but in terms of my vocation, this is my life's work. I have to do this. I'm doing it less than I probably did 20 years ago. as I was building my business, but I need to do this. This is a part of what my calling is in life. Authenticity is not about fixing what's broken. It's about engaging in a compassionate excavation to uncover your true authentic self. Now, this has absolute leadership application, because my passion is as leaders become authentic, we create authentic workplaces where we respect and support who you are. We're not trying to change you. You are honored and respected, not just tolerated. You are respected for who you are as a person. We connect you to your unique abilities, to each other, and to your life's work, and make a meaningful contribution to the world through inspired engagement. You want to get people engaged. You don't have to motivate people. What we need to do is create an environment where people can be who they are. There's nothing worse. I think if you've ever had an experience of living in an organ or working in an organization where you have to leave who you are at the door, what's your level of engagement? What's your level of passion that comes to that? At the same time, how can we create a place where you don't have to leave who you are at the door? You can come and be who you are. That's what an authentic workplace is. And this is what makes a difference. And my whole premise is that work then becomes a tool to create what really truly matters in our life. And it shifts the whole thing. Now, in terms of change, this is the whole premise that I want to. Changes and accompanying difficulties in your life are doorways to uncovering your authentic self, as we allow the pain as we go through change to break us open so that a stronger, wiser, kinder self can emerge. I have a bias that when we go through change, we have an opportunity to use that change to connect with our authentic self. Now, if you just want to cope with the change and just get rid of it and get through it, by the way, good luck if you want to get rid of it. I mean, if you don't like change, I don't know where you're going to go in the world today. I mean, the whole, this is life. This has always been life, is change. But if you just want to cope with it, you probably aren't going to get much value. Nothing wrong with coping with change, but if you're not committed to using that change to connect with your authentic self and make your life more meaningful and deeper, and where you're stronger and wiser and kinder in the process of change, my message may not have a lot of value for you today. Now, we all are at various stages and cycles in the life cycle, in the seasons of life. So I don't know where you're at, but I'm planting seeds, and I just need you to know what my bias is right off the bat, that I'm here to help guide you to your authentic self, inspire you to become authentic. So that's my bias around change. Choose in your mind one change that you're currently going through, have gone through, or anticipate going through, just in your own mind. If you pick, you're probably going through 10 right now, but just pick one. It'll make this experience in this next hour very much more relevant for you if you pick a very practical change that you're in the midst of. So let me give you an example, some examples of personal change: getting a new boss, becoming a new boss, losing your job, getting a health diagnosis, moving, becoming a parent, and in my case, becoming a grandparent, as I became a grandparent this summer, and we're in the process of, many of you who know me know that I'm in the process of moving and downsizing, and that's another story, but I will integrate some of my experience in this presentation today. A child leaving home. How many of you have children that you wish were leaving home? A death of a loved one, a marriage, a divorce, a vacation. If you haven't had a vacation for a while and you go on a vacation, it's going to be a change, and there's a process of reacting and responding to that vacation, dealing with new technology, retiring, or career changing, or an accident, a car accident, a traumatic event. These are just some examples. So pick one. You may have half a dozen of these going on all at once. Just pick one, and it'll make the experience today more meaningful. Or here's some examples of at an organizational level or a team level that you might be going through. A new IT system, a new structure, a reorganization, acquisition or merger, a new business model, new initiatives, a process change, a new boss, a new government, a new mandate, layoffs, policy updates. These are just examples of the changes that you're going to be moving your teams through if you're in a position of leadership, or that might be in the middle of dealing with. So you can pick a personal change, you can pick an organizational change, just pick one, and it'll make the material more relevant for you. Changes in your life are doorways to uncovering your authentic self if you choose to deepen rather than distract in response to the change. So my premise is that we like to hide, and it's not wrong to hide. What I'm asking you to do is notice when you're hiding. It's a natural biological response, and not to mention psychological response, that when we go through change, none of us like change. I mean, some of us like to help other people change, but when we're going through change, if you're really going through a change, it tends to not, our biological, we have to override our biology, because our biology likes to keep things stable and protect us. That's what our biology is designed for. Your brain is designed to protect you. So it's a natural tendency that when you push, or particularly when you foist change on others, or when change has been foisted at you, we resist it. And it's a sign of life. You know, you take a bug and you poke a bug, it's going to squirm. It's going to react to that. It's a sign that you're alive. So don't be concerned. Well, be concerned, but don't worry about resistance. That means that you're alive. But there are some tools to deal with it. So it's a matter of, are you going to distract, or are you going to allow yourself to deepen it? And it's counterintuitive to allow the deepening, because we want to distract. Now, what ways can you distract? Protective responses in response to this is we drug. I work 20 hours a week, volunteer my time in the addictions field. And addiction predominantly comes from a reaction from pain and trauma early in our life. And we develop a pattern of drugging as a way, whether it's booze or food or shopping. Consuming is another way. You know, we just, you know, you have a rough life, you know, you're going through change, you're having some difficulty, just go shop. And then you have an online Amazon that you can shop 24 hours a day, and just notice yourself in the midst of change, increasing your shopping. Increasing busyness is a way of distracting. How many of you know people who are going through a loss right now, who are, and maybe you've experienced this yourself, the loss of a loved one, and you stay busy as a way of coping with it. And you get a lot of reinforcement for it because you stay busy. And this is a way of distracting, facing, and deepening. You stay busy. Conforming. I'm just going to play the party line. I'm just going to keep my job. I'm just going to just obey. And I'm going to not feel anything. I'm just going to keep going. Complaining, blaming, drama binging. This is where we get into repeating it. You know, we see this when there's a crisis in the world, and we watch it over and over and over, and we create dramas and stories about what's going on. I remember years ago, I'll never forget this woman. I've never met a woman who's so angry at her ex-husband. She just spewed anger. And I asked her casually, how long have you been divorced? And she said 21 years. She hadn't stopped to allow that divorce to deepen her, to transform her life. What she was doing is staying in the drama of the anger and not allowing herself to deepen. Controlling. This is what happens so often with bosses who have had trauma in their life, and they haven't dealt with it, and they haven't allowed their past or their present experiences to be deepened. And what they do is go into control and intimidating and bullying. And so we see this in the workplace as a way of distracting yourself from changes and trauma that have happened earlier in your life. So these are just some examples. And again, not to judge yourself. We all protect ourselves. We all have protective ways, but just notice, be aware with, as I say, compassion when you're distracting. It is a natural tendency. And my premise is embrace the hard stuff. Reality is our friend. Lean toward whatever you're going through. You don't have to be afraid of the dark. What do we say to kids? We turn the light on and show them what's underneath the bed. You don't have to be afraid of the dark. It's not as frightening as we think it is. So I have a bias toward going to funerals. I have a bias toward leaning in because I have a bias toward authenticity. And my bias is, again, I'm not saying that my way is right or wrong. I'm only inviting you, if you want to become more authentic, lean into the hard stuff. Lean into reality. It is our friend. We don't need to be afraid of it. That's a bias that I work from. As we say in the trauma field, look the dragon in the eye, stare it down and face it and be with it, lean into it. And it's not as frightening as we might think it is. Okay, but there are some tools to get us through that. So the one thing I want to say when we develop a framework, so that's kind of a backdrop to all this. But then now I want to do is, and I have a 4-day course on this. So this is a really condensed version of my life in transition course. But what I'm suggesting is that it's important to get 3 words: change versus transition versus transformation. And I can just give you an example here because I'm right in the middle of it myself. I may not be totally objective, but moving. If you were to move across the country, how long would it take to move? I moved 10 minutes. We downsized, got rid of 3/4 of our stuff, downsized, moved into a home that was half the size of what we raised our kids in this home. We changed. Now, how long did the change take? When my father died, when my brother died, when my mother died, how long did the change take? 1 breath, and my life is changed forever. How long did the move take? It literally took a day to pack, to pack our boxes into a truck and move. Actually, it took 10 minutes to go from one destination to another. You can move across this country in a week. That's the change. How long does the transition take? Well, I'm still in the transition. It's been months and it will continue to be months. And then the transformation. So it's important to understand that change occurs outside of a person. Transition occurs inside of a person. Transition is the reorientation that people go through as they come to terms with change. Transformation is about leading the process of transition to move you and others into a whole new perception of themselves and the world. And I'm going to say, we're in the business, many of you may be in the business of change management in your organizations. We are really good at change management, or at least we're better at change management than we are at transition management. And if you notice this, recognize this in your, in our own move. I mean, we were consumed with hiring a moving company. How do we pack this stuff? What do we let go of? What do we donate? What do we give away? Managing the change. We live here now. Getting a realtor, buying a new house. This is all change management. It's all managing the external. But the transition is, how does this impact our relationship? How does it impact our kids that we had this beautiful acreage that we no longer have? How did that impact us? How does this impact us personally? What's the grieving process? What are we letting go of? It's a whole, it's not, I'm not saying it's wrong to manage the change. You have to manage the change, but we're better at the change management than we are at the transition management. What's going on inside of people as they reorient themselves to this change? And I'm just suggesting that we're not as well equipped to deal with the transitions in our life. And I want to spend some time. Really, what I'm doing this morning is, it's not change management that I'm offering you. It's transition management. It's not so much that we're afraid of change and uncertainty or so in love with the old ways, said Marilyn Ferguson, but it's that place in between that we fear. It's like being in between trapezes. It's Linus when his blanket's in the dryer. There's nothing to hang on to. And I can assure you from my own experience of being on a high wire, that when you let go of, it's that 7/10 of a second, when you let go of one trapeze and take hold of the other, even though you've got a safety net, and even if you've got a cord that's going to hold you, it hurts, still hurt. These nets that you fall into, they hurt. But even if you've got a safety net that you're safe, it's still, your brain is still telling you, no, hang on to what's secure. So this is, I've developed a little model here. There's many of these kinds of models, and I think we're all saying the same thing. We may use different languages, But this is the model that I've developed over by helping families and individuals and organizations navigate the transition process. I've developed this little graph here. Many of you who have on this call are familiar with my graph. I'm going to go through it relatively quickly today. On the y-axis is certainty, and on the x-axis is growth. I don't know how many of you are aware that it's really hard to grow when you're certain. You have to let go of certainty to step into the unknown. And so I'm graphing these. And so what I've done is I've just drawn. Now, again, it's not a linear graph. It's probably more circular, and it's a map. It's not the whole territory, but it's a way of giving you a language that you can use with yourself and your teams and your family when you're going through a transition process and you're going through a change and adapting to the change in a transition. Now, these are 8 different stages that I've got. And again, no one follows this by formula, but it's a rough map of the territory. So first of all, we get attached. It's natural human tendency to become attached to the familiar. You don't have to our brain works this way, that we get into ruts as a way of ease and protection. You don't have to figure out how you drive your car to work every morning. When you get into your car, it's rather automatic. Unfortunately, it becomes so automatic that we can get to work and wonder how on earth we even got there because we weren't conscious of being present to the whole experience. Nonetheless, we get attached to the familiar. And by the way, you can use this change process for when you wake up in the morning. We all go through a change every day when we get out of bed in the morning, when we come home from work at night, whether we're working at home or whether we're traveling to the office, we make a change when we come home. So you can apply this to a day-to-day, or you can apply it to a crisis, or you can apply it to any long-term change that you're making. Anyway, we become familiar with the attachment to the familiar. You are lying in bed and the alarm clock goes off. You're attached to the familiar, which is your bed, right? As my dad would say, it's mind over mattress when it's time to get up. All right, I digress. So we become attached to, you can become attached to a particular computer system. We become attached to a relationship. We become attached to routines. And then at some point, we're going to get a foreign element, something that interrupts the pattern, interrupts the familiar. Now, sometimes that foreign element can actually be a wake-up call, because we're here to grow and to learn, and this is what I believe is the purpose of life. If you get too attached, oftentimes foreign elements can be wake-up calls to say, hey, it's time to grow. But sometimes foreign elements have nothing to do with a wake-up call. They just happen. Death happens. Accidents happen. And yes, there's an opportunity to grow in that and to respond in a way. But sometimes those come with the intent to grow. And sometimes we just have to find a way to say, hey, I'm going to make this, I'm going to use this experience, this foreign element, as a way of deepening myself and deepening my presence and my connection with my authentic self. So the stage that we go through, the third stage, is that any foreign element will take us into chaos. Now, let's talk about the process of chaos. First of all, foreign elements, any foreign element could be that list of changes that you just had in your mind that interrupted the attachment to the familiar. And again, you may have initiated that foreign element, or it could have just been you just could be blindsided and you just get that foreign element. It's the similar process. Really proactive people who are committed to their development will introduce foreign elements into their life as a way of saying, you know what? I don't want to get too comfortable with my life. I want to move out of comfort, because yes, it's nice to be comfortable for a while, but I can't grow as long as I'm comfortable. I've got to step out of my comfort zone to experience some growth. But whenever we do that, we are going to move into chaos. Now, if you can tell me, there's nothing wrong with chaos. It's just chaotic. It's different. You go through an emotional experience. Now, if you're in a process right now of, oh, I'm not in, I had a foreign element, but I'm not in chaos. I'm thriving on this. I love this change. Then it's not really a foreign element. True foreign element will truly throw you into chaos. All right. vacation, you get thrown into, I'm not saying it's wrong to be in chaos. I'm just saying if it's unfamiliar, you're going to experience being unraveled. For a seed to achieve its greatest expression, it has to be completely undone. The shell breaks, its insides come out, and everything changes. To someone who doesn't understand growth, it would be a complete destruction. But this destruction is actually opening you to a kinder, wiser, stronger self, right? When one door, but this is what we're talking about, is this chaos, this transition, is that when one door closes, another one opens. I think we're all familiar with that saying. You know what they don't tell you is it's hell in the corridor. It's that in-between period that gets so difficult. So I'm going to suggest here's some emotions that accompany potentially the corridor of chaos. Now, there's probably 100 emotions. These are the key ones that I see. Fear. People get afraid. Uncertainty and confusion. You can tell when you're in chaos when you want to go back to the old days. You want to go back to the old ways. You want to go back to the familiar, right? Uncertainty and confusion, loss and grief, suspicion and betrayal, self-doubt. Now, all chaos will accompany at least some of that list of feelings. Now, my question is, there's nothing wrong with those feelings. My question is, what have you done with that? When we went through the pandemic, we went through all of those emotions. And my question is, what did you do with those emotions? Did you just bury them and stay busy and pretend they weren't there? Or did you actually have a process? What was your process? Did you name them? Did you talk about them? Did you share them in a community? There's no right or wrong to this, but I'm asking you, what did you do with those feelings? What do you do with the feelings that whenever you're in chaos and those feelings surface, what do you do with that? There's many rules today that say, I can't feel any of that. There's something wrong with me. So we just bury them. Now, men historically have had, have been given a message. This generation and last couple of generations, we've made a huge step forward to acknowledging and accepting those emotions. But those aren't common feelings that traditionally men are taught to deal with. If you don't deal with these, what I call primary feelings, they'll turn into secondary feelings, and they'll turn into anger, irritability and impatience, polarization and intolerance, or you'll internalize it and get depressed. So we see this in spades, and I don't think we've still felt the healing, and we haven't really healed from this pandemic, and we're still feeling this sense of political divisiveness in our world and the divisiveness in our culture, and we see it in organizations. And I'm just asking you, it's easy to point the finger and see the anger outside of yourself, to see the increase in road rage, whatever. But what I'm asking you to do is to notice when you see these within yourself, and notice what have you done with the primary feelings. I just noticed for myself, I've been more impatient lately. We're in a new house now. It's a beautiful home. We're very blessed. I know we made the right decision to downsize, and we felt this sense of freedom. And what I'm finding myself is I'm irritable. I'm finding myself impatient with my wife. And even when I'm dealing with customers, I'm finding myself just impatient. And even with my clients, my coaching clients, I've noticed lately that I've just been less tolerant. And what I'm recognizing from I had a session with my own therapist and my own support group over the last couple of weeks. And what I'm noticing is that I haven't been stopping and recognizing, even though this is the right decision, we've been so busy that I haven't stopped and allowed myself to feel the grief, to feel the loss of letting go of a beautiful place that we had for 20 years. And yes, it was time to move on. Yes, it was time to downsize, but don't underestimate and don't allow myself to acknowledge that there was some loss. And I'm making space for that right now. And what I'm noticing is that's impacting. My anger is diminishing as I make space. But this is a red flag for me. Hey, I'm not allowing myself to feel the primary feelings, okay? Now, these are indicators of being in the corridor too long. And this is what we see often in organizations, but also in life: resentment, cynicism, bitterness, disabling worry, low morale, resignation, exhaustion. And the worst thing is indifference. People stop caring and they just tune out. And so these are always indicators. Now, organizations have a responsibility to support people through chaos, but ultimately we all have to take responsibility, personal accountability, get ourselves through chaos. And the way we do that is through this next stages. So then we go to a reflection stage. We've gone through the 4 now. Now, again, how long does chaos last? It can last. I always say in an organizational change, you have to give an organization probably 3 to 6 months. You have to give people that space to be in chaos. It's not a time necessarily to be real productive, but it's a time to be very creative, and it's a time to make connections with people. It's a time to really connect with what's going on with people. Now, again, what happens is we throw them into chaos, and we throw them into more chaos, and we throw them into more chaos. And oftentimes people just never have a chance to get through this. But we have to take responsibility to get it through it ourselves. And then we go into a reflection period where we begin to say, Now, again, it's not linear, but we energetically, there's an emotional part of chaos. If you've gone through a severe death, it's going to take years before you never feel normal again. But you will get to the point where you can begin to say, there's an opportunity here. But you don't stand up in a funeral and say, this is a great opportunity. No, people have to grieve before they can rebuild. But then what will move you out of chaos is a decision. Now, the day came when the risk to remain tight in a bud was more painful than the risk it took to blossom. Okay? Here's some decisions. Change your story. We get attached to our story. Let go of blame and fear and resentments. Change your attitude. Go from enraged to engaged. Change jobs, change careers, change the way you're doing your job, or reach out for help. These are examples of decisions that will move you out of chaos. Now, again, energetically, you will always go back to some degree to some of those feelings. When you're grieving, you can rebuild your life, but still feel at times that you'll go back and have moments when you'll cry, when tears will just come to you and you can sob. But they don't consume you the way they do in early stages of chaos, okay? You must be willing to let go of the life you've planned, said Joseph Campbell, so that you can have the life that you were meant to live. And then you begin the journey of rebuilding. Now there's good news, and then you begin to build trust for yourself and trust in a team. Trust in an organization will take a real hit through this. And there's good news and the bad news. The good news is you get new possibilities. The bad news is you're going to get new attachments. You're going to keep going through the process again. You're never done. This is an ongoing journey. But what I'm suggesting is that we need to become more skillful at taking ourselves and our teams and our loved ones through this process of transition. Okay? So where do we go with this? What I want to do is that I want to leave you some strategies for getting through this process, particularly of chaos, of these transition stages. This is a call to action. So I want to give you 4 practical things that you can actually begin to work on. Slow down, get your bearings is the first thing we're going to focus on. Make a space for grief. This is particularly relevant for me these days, but loss and grief is something that we just have not allowed ourselves, society-wise, to really feel. We distract ourselves, and we stay so busy that we don't take the opportunity to really learn. And grief, for me, is the doorway to our soul. And I have a bias toward this, but we don't need to be afraid of grief. Embrace it. I just finished reading a book called The Wild Edge of Sorrow by Francis Weller, who speaks to this a grieving society that we have and how we escape from grief. I'm a real Francis Weller fan. We build a community that supports you and holds you accountable to get yourself through the whole transition process, and then building a practice that offers what I call a ballast, something to help hold you steady through the difficult times. So let me just go through these one at a time. get your bearings. For anybody that's been lost, and I've spent enough time in the wilderness to get lost, to be lost from time to time, the natural tendency is to speed up because you get anxious. And what happens when you get anxious is that you get lost faster. So what you learn in survival school is basic, it's counterintuitive, but when you're lost, the most important thing is to stop and get your bearings. What are my values? Where am I? Where's my compass? Where's my direction? And in order to get to move forward with a new direction, you have to know where you're at personally. It's an old and ironic habit of human beings to run faster, folks, when we've lost our way. But up until about 10 or 15 years ago, it was unavoidable that time and again throughout the day, you were alone with your thoughts while in line at the pharmacy, waiting for the elevator, walking the dog, commuting to work, at the gym. Now we've banished it. You just notice, go downtown in any city. I drive by a high school on the way to my office every morning. And I just noticed the high school students walking to school. 3/4 of them are looking down. They're not looking up. They're looking down at their devices. It's been said that we've spent years of our life looking down at our devices now. And walk downtown, any city, walk downtown, any city, and just notice the people. Notice how we're focusing on our devices. We don't have a minute in the day to just sit and connect with ourselves. And again, I'm asking, how much of this is distracting from the transitions that we're all in our personal lives, and we're just deflecting instead of deepening? This is very, this just came to me yesterday, and you'll see the quality of the community of the friends in my life. One of the blessings that I have in my life is the amazing people that come to me and the friends I make as a result of my work. This is an email that came to me yesterday morning. And I got Chaz's permission to share this with you. Some of you know Chaz, who was on our team for a long time. Chaz is a beautiful guy. He's a construction manager. I met him because I worked with his company, did some leadership development for his company, and then he came to my Authentic Leadership Academy up at the Banff Center when we had them before the pandemic. And he's just maintained a great friendship with me. See, he sent me this photograph, and here's the email. Great morning, my friend. I hope you and Val are doing well. Fall morning photo moment I wanted to share with you. Saw this sunrise today. It felt good to just look up and smile at the beauty one photo cannot capture. This morning, God painted the sky. I wonder if anyone else noticed. It was such a short moment. It was over in 5 minutes. It made me reflect on life and how it's only 5 minutes long. So we must be able to stop, sit, and just look up once in a while. Miracles are happening every day, and I must remind myself to be quiet. Enjoy the 5 minutes I have. I sat there and just enjoyed the colors. Fall is my favorite season. It just feels right to me. The most magical thing about being human, it's about our 5 minutes to look up and live each moment. I hope you are well, sir. Give that wife a big hug for me. This is a guy who's had his own changes, his own traumas in life, and has become a better person because he's allowed that to deepen his life. These are the choice moments. What makes life so precious, folks, is the deep and profound awareness that it's temporary. What makes a rose so beautiful is that it won't last forever. Buy a friend a plastic rose and it won't have any value. Why? Because it will outlive the person you give it to. What makes life precious is to recognize that it's not going to end, it's not going to last forever. It's only this moment that we can enjoy and embrace. So to connect with ourselves, and it's paradoxically, we tend to stay very busy, particularly when we're in chaos. But the most important thing is to make room to slow down. Losses. What have you lost in the last 2 years? Or in the change that you've identified? What are you letting go of? And how have you dealt with that loss? Who have you turned to? How have you faced that loss? I know I lost my mother-in-law in the pandemic. And I needed to stop and grieve that loss. And then that we had funeral protocols. So we couldn't have a full funeral where enough family members could come and hold each other and have a ritual. So we had to create our own ritual. Rituals, I believe, are so important. I'm big on funerals. I'm not big on creating them, but I'm big on funerals. Whenever you have an opportunity to go and celebrate a life, but it isn't just the celebration of a life, it's also allowing a ritual to grieve. Because I just look at embracing grief in our life as a doorway to our passion. This is the weight of grief, this enormous creativity that can come in times of grief. This amazing artist found a way to convey the physical feeling of grief. Where is grief registered in your body? Feel it, embrace it, lean toward it. Okay? It's interesting. Passion comes from the Latin word passio, meaning to suffer and to endure. It's so interesting. I will tell you with almost, I'm going to say 100% assurity of all the research I've done and the experience I've had with people who come to me for coaching and they say, I've lost touch with my passion. I can't get passionate about my life. I can't get passionate about my relationship. I can't get passionate about my work. With 100% surety, that person has grieving to do that they have not acknowledged. And the first thing we do is that I say, where in your life have you had losses that you have not faced? Where have you had losses that you have not embraced and leaned into? And the awakening of when people can, I've watched people go through the rituals of community grieving. We run a program out at Wayfinders where we respond to first responders and military who have had PTSD, and we have Indigenous ceremonies. And when people get aware of their grief in response to the trauma that they've had in their life, and they begin to heal, what happens is they awaken some passion, newfound passion they never had in their life. You want passion in your organization. You want passion in your life. You got to embrace the grief with it, whatever grief. And I don't know any of us who have not gone through some kind of loss in our life. And how have we dealt with that? Next point that I want to just mention is, so we make room for grief, but we also need a community. This is lonely work, but it can't be done alone. And community comes in the form of confidants, where we can have a true friend that we can open ourselves up with. Allies, we need allies that are going through this process with us, and guides who have been through the process before and can give us some guideposts as we move through it. We're not in Kansas anymore. And Dorothy found 3 allies when she was going through her transition. We need people in our life that will connect us to our heart. We need people in our life who will connect us to our wisdom. And we need people in our life who will connect us to our courage. And of course, there's always a dog. All right? We need a practice, as we say, something that will hold us up, that will keep us steady, a ballast that will hold us up and keep us steady through the difficult times. For some people, it's a meditation practice that they just religiously meditate each morning, regardless of how you feel, regardless of what you're going through. You show up in the morning and you meditate, creating a sanctuary in your day, a place where you can just go and be with yourself. For some people, it's a prayer, a ritual of prayer each morning when they reach to a power greater than themselves to restore that for themselves each day, but a ballast to keep yourself buoyed up and held up in the midst of chaos. Oftentimes, my experience is when people go through chaos, they revert to a childhood perspective, and that's the complaining and the self-pity. And it's very easy to revert back to how we are, because it can a trigger as an adult can trigger us when we had a trauma and were unacknowledged as kids. So it's very easy to go back and be a child through this process. And what a practice does is it keeps us connected to our adult self, a stronger future self that can keep ourselves buoyed and that can keep ourselves with composure. And it doesn't mean that we deny it, but we grieve it through an adult lens rather than through a childhood lens. When we allow the grief, anybody that's been around a child and when they're going through a loss, and it, you know, maybe a loss of a toy, and they'll have a temper tantrum. And most of us have not had adults in our life that are able to have known how to hold that child and acknowledge it without putting that child in the driver's seat and allow those feelings to run the show. We need to be held internally without putting those emotions in the driver's seat. Yeah, I'm a Leonard Cohen fan. The blizzard of the world has crossed the threshold and it has overturned the order of the soul. What we're dealing with today is this blizzard of demands. You know, our inbox, you know, how many of us have inboxes that we'll never get through? And we just get consumed by the demands, by the blizzard of the expectations of the world around us. And technology just makes those so accessible to us. If we don't take charge of technology, they become our slave. There was a time when the farmers of the Great Plains would run a rope from their backyard to the barn at the first sign of a blizzard. They all knew stories of people who'd wandered off and froze to death, having lost sight of their home in a whiteout while still in their own backyards. What's the rope that we hang on to that doesn't change, folks? We all need a rope that's going to bring ourselves home each day, and a practice, be it a prayer practice, a yoga practice, a meditation practice, something that you do steadily each day, consistently. Not, you know, it doesn't have to be spectacular. And you just show up on the mat. You show up on the, you know, pray in your prayer time, in your sanctuary, and it keeps that steadiness in the midst of the change. Okay. So the reflection period, I just want to leave you some questions at an individual level. What's working well in your life? As you've gone through some degree of chaos and you felt this, there's some reflection time that's necessary. What areas are not flowing or working well in your life? How am I accountable to? How am I being accountable at the expense of my authenticity? Oftentimes we get so busy being accountable to others that we miss and connect to our own authenticity. How am I integrating those two? What must I be willing to let go of to make room for the life I'm called for? And then what am I committed to preserve? Folks, not all change is good. It's all part of life, but we all have to know, I will preserve my values, for example, or I will preserve my connection to the important people in my life. What parts of my work life do I feel most excited and passionate about? How will I define success? What decisions do I need to make? What agreements will I make to myself? What resources are available to me? These are reflective questions. And oftentimes early in the chaos, we're too filled with emotion to be able to step back with poise and answer some of these questions. But when we begin to make room for these questions, we know that we're progressing through the transition process. Here's some team examples, questions you can bring back to your team when they're in the midst of transition. And I always say we need to have contained place where people can just either one-on-one or in a small group of high trusting individuals talk about that transition. On a scale of 1 to 10, however you rate that, how are we doing in the transition? Well, how can we take it up a notch? What are you doing to get yourself through the transition, to honoring yourself? What must be willing to let go of to make room for something new on this team? What are we committed to preserve? What decisions are needed? And what will we agree to continue to support each other? All right, in the last 10 minutes, I just want to leave you with some thoughts about the hero's journey. Again, we could spend a whole webinar on this, much less a whole day probably on this, on the whole premise. The whole premise of the hero's journey came from a book that was written in 1947, actually, by a guy named Joseph Campbell, who was actually very influential for me when he was alive. I actually took some courses from Joseph back in the 1980s. And it shifted. It's a way of reframing and shifting the way that we look at change. rather than a crisis, we look at it through a different set of lenses. Now, he developed this whole notion of the hero's journey, became friends with a guy named George Lucas, and lived on George Lucas's ranch. And the whole Star Wars was built on the premise of the motif that Joseph Campbell shared with George in his work. The cave that you seek to enter holds the treasure that you seek, is the whole premise here. You must be willing to let go of the life you planned so as to have the life that you were meant to live. A hero or heroine, and this is my own interpretation, isn't someone who is above others. I've often, in my work with this, I've said, well, I don't want to be a hero. I don't want to be anybody's hero. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're above others in the world, but you have found and followed a path above your lower self. You've faced the dragons in your life. We're going on an adventure. If you're a Hobbit fan, we're going on an adventure. And you know, if you can reframe no matter what you're going through in your life, if you can see it as an adventure, it will shift everything in your body. Instead of a crisis that I have to cope with, no, we're stepping into a new frontier, a new adventure. Life's most exciting and fulfilling adventure is the journey into ourselves, the discovery of who we really are, the discovery of our gifts, the discovery of our passion, the discovery of our calling, of what we're meant to bring to the world. In light of the hero's journey is defined as embracing a time of great difficulty, allowing the pain to break us open so that a stronger, wiser, kinder, more creative self can emerge. Through the lens of the hero's journey, and this is like you're called to a different reality, and then you face the demons on that reality, and then you come back and you integrate it back into your life. But through the lens of the hero's journey, adversity is viewed as something wanting to be born. I remember a friend of mine had open heart surgery when he was in his 60s. And I turned to him after in his recovery process. And I said, well, what did you learn? And he said, you know what? I've learned I need to open my heart. I've learned that, I need in this next chapter of my life to live with more compassion, to live with more emotion, to live with more feeling. I've shut myself off for too long. I've lived in my head. And that open heart surgery that just, it stemmed from a heart attack that just about took him down. He used it as an opportunity to say, no, something wants to be born here. You can take any of those chapters and you could pathologize any of those chapters in the transformation from a caterpillar to a butterfly. You could take that larva stage, that second chapter, and say, you know what, that it's mush. Let's send it to a psychiatrist. And believe me, I don't have anything against psychiatrists. I've been to a few in my life, and they're a great resource. But let's not pathologize it. Let's embrace these chapters in our life as opportunities to say, and I'm not denying the pain, that when we face the pain, we realize, you know what, this chapter was actually a needed chapter in my life to get to where I am today. And my whole premise is that we delight in the beauty of the butterfly, but rarely acknowledge the changes it had to go through to achieve that beauty. What does this crisis, whatever that is, make possible? What is wanting to be born? And my whole notion is that life is a novel, not a chapter. I have a good friend whose son got into addiction as a teenager. Now, if you took that chapter in his life, you'd say, you know what, the kid is going down. But if you begin to look at that chapter, not as the whole story, but as a chapter in that kid's life, he ended up going to jail. He ended up living on the street. And then he ended up getting into a recovery program. And that recovery program brought him to starting a whole center where he takes addicts and takes them into a physical fitness program, into a gym, and he's now 40 and has created a whole gym and a whole recovery community because he went through his own pain. And he took that pain and he turned it into beauty. But if you were to just judge that kid for the chapter that he was in his life, you would say he's got a horrible life and he's really failed his life. He didn't complete high school, but actually it was a chapter on the journey. Okay. So if your life were a book, what would be its title? And what chapter are you in right now? What is the chapter right now that you're living through? So in conclusion, I will share with you what my book, and it's interesting because I'm really just working on my own life story. And at this point, my working title is An Authentic Journey. Let your life be your voice. And these would be 9 of the chapters in my book. And it's kind of interesting as I go through these chapters, they're kind of a 7-year cycle. About every 7 years, the chapter changes. But alone, and there's a story, as you can imagine, behind every one of those chapters. But if you can begin to look, and this is what leaders do, is guides in our life, is that they lead us to seeing the chapter from a much wider context. Alone, gasping for air, on top of the mountain, all the way down, the power of integrity, caring is everything, letting go and letting God, emerging, becoming myself, and then giving back. That would be the story of my own life. And every one of those chapters, again, has a story within the story. And it's beginning to look at our life through a mythological lens, not through a psychological lens that we have to fix and that we have to make better and cure and get through this, but rather hold it in a different light, hold it with a different lens, and begin to see the changes in our life as helping us evolve to a place where we're truly meant to be and express ourselves, and a necessary chapter in the journey. Okay. So folks, what's up next? Look for our next, I'm just in the process of renewing our Authentic Leadership Academy in the spring. So keep an eye out for that. We're doing a fundraiser for Jasper in the coming year. We're going to have a virtual event that we're just beginning. We're in the very early stages of organizing that event. Keep that in mind. And if you're interested in coming back, if this intrigues you, our next webinar is going to be on Friday, October the 18th at the same time. And the topic is going to be tackling the tough accountability conversations. It's not what you think. And if we can support you in any way in our journey, please feel free to reach out to me personally. And again, here's my website. Thank you very, very much. For those who have to jump off, I know that many of you have to jump off here. It's amazing that you took this time to be with me. And I just appreciate sincerely